welcome back. Now, teacher unions have expressed their disappointment at the Departments of Basic Education and Health for failing to consult them about matrics who've tested positive for COVID-19 being allowed to write their final exams in a separate venue with restrictions. Now, they've written to Minister Angie Motshekga stating that while they acknowledge the right of every learner to sit for the examination, they will not have the health and safety of their members compromised. The class of 2020 wrote their first paper on Thursday last week, and to talk to us more about these latest developments, we're joined by Basil Manuel, who is the Executive Director of the National Professional Teachers Organization of South Africa, or NAPTOSA, as well as Mugwena Maluleke, who is the General Secretary of the South African Democratic Teachers Union, SATU. Gentlemen, thanks for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, pleasure to
be with you. Good morning, and thank you for having us.
Let me just start by asking you first, Mr. Maluleke, and then Mr. Manuel, you can answer the same question. So how and when did you first hear about the decision by the department that matrics who have tested positive for COVID-19 would actually be allowed to write, although it will be in a separate venue with restrictions? Mr. Maluleke?
Thank you for having us that particular question, and thank you for having us. Look, we received some SMS messages and WhatsApp from our principals on the same day when the students were about to write. And clearly it is that we did not have any clue of what was happening, because we have had the protocol which was there, which was clearly indicating that if a learner were to test positive, that learner was not going to write. So therefore the principals were very much confused about what exactly they have got to do, given the fact that they have a protocol in their hands, and now they're receiving a circular which has not amended the protocol, and that particular circular was almost like 4 lines that was giving an indication that a learner who tested positive should write in the same school in an isolation room. The second time we heard about it is when the minister was answering a question in Soweto that particular morning when she was monitoring the examination, and said the school have an isolation area which they've been using, so it's not something new and therefore they must use it. And that was totally against the protocol that was agreed upon and that was distributed to the school, and that has caused serious confusion, and therefore we had to intervene immediately so that we are able to assist the learners and the schools in order to avoid any transmission of the virus unnecessarily so, because all of us have a responsibility to ensuring that we cut the chain of this particular virus. It was unfortunate that the department did not consult the unions, because they could have canvassed some wisdom from the people who are directly in the school and know what it is to be facing a situation where when you are confused, you cause more trauma, more anxiety to the learners and the staff at all.
Mr. Manuel, pretty much the same for NAPTOSA?
Pretty much the same. We first saw it in a news brief that was sent out by the DBE. And of course, we reacted with surprise. As Mugwena says, our principals started panicking. And there's an assumption that every school has an isolation area, which is untrue. They simply don't have. Some schools don't have enough classrooms. And our issue was, as NAPTOSA and the other unions, mind you, was that we needed to stick to the protocols, and we needed to ensure that we don't send mixed messages, not only to teachers and to learners, but to the public at large. If we are in contact with somebody that is positive, then we have to isolate. So how then does the school manage this? And this is why the intervention became so critical. And just a slight correction, we then had a meeting on Friday night with the Director General, where as the collective of unions, we sat down and we thrashed out a couple of things with that. And today we have a slightly better protocol, spells out slightly better direction. It is not perfect, there are still some gaps, but I want to acknowledge that we are in a better place than we were on Thursday.
So with regard to those protocols, because one would imagine if you were not aware of these new directives allowing matriculants who are COVID positive to write, what sort of preparations did you then have in place in order to deal with them on Thursday when they came through to write? Mr. Manuel, let me start with you.
Remember, Sakina, at first, the original protocol was very straightforward, that if you've tested positive, like with any other person in the entire country, you had to go into isolation. And isolation meant at home or in a facility that had been set aside by the Department of Health. And that was the protocol our teachers and our principals knew. Suddenly, this news brief came out and people were arriving at school. And of course, our people didn't know what to do. And even now, the fallout from that particular issue is that there are people that have gone into isolation today because, or on Friday, because they were in contact with learners that did arrive. And we know that there were learners in a number of provinces that had tested positive. So there was no great preparation. Now, I know we were under pressure. However, it's an indictment on us too, as the DBE, that we had the opportunity to plan for this. I know there are many things about COVID that we can't foresee, but this one we could have foreseen, and we should have planned better, and we should have prepared our schools better. The knee-jerk reaction is a great pity, but let's get beyond that. Now we have the situation. We acknowledge that learners must be given the opportunity to write, but it is only those who are healthy enough to write. You can have COVID, but you're not healthy enough to write. You still can't come and write. So at the moment, we are sitting with a protocol that says this must happen off the premises as a first priority. And teachers, and this was our point, teachers are not compelled to invigilate. We must have health practitioners who have the right gear, who are attuned to dealing with people that have tested positive, so that we don't start an outbreak in our schools all over again.
And that's a very important point, Mr. Maluleke, when Mr. Manuel says teachers are not compelled to actually invigilate these classes where learners who are COVID-19 positive are writing. So what has been the reaction from your members?
Well, on that Thursday, our members were really confused, and then some of them, clearly, they refused to invigilate the learners because they had the protocol in front of them, and therefore they had to remind the principal and the department officials to say, look, whilst they do not have a problem with the learners writing, however, they are not equipped to be able to deal with that situation. In one school, the principal and the department officials then forced the teachers to invigilate. Hence, you hear Basil saying that we had a situation where they have to be in quarantine because some of them have got to go and take tests in terms of the current regulations and protocols because they've been in contact with a person who has tested positive. And therefore, but at least today, they will have a better plan because it means the parents or the guardian has got to inform the principal timeously and take responsibility in ensuring that the learner does not move around but is confined, and if he has got to be taken to a quarantine site or a site that has been designated by the Department of Health, manned by them, equipped by them, invigilated by a highly person who is health coaches but also have skills in health in terms of transmission prevention and so forth. Together with the department, they will work together. But the onus is on the parents and the guardians of our learners not to conceal information when the learner is showing signs or symptoms, or even if he's not showing symptoms, but anyone in the family has tested positive and therefore the learner has got to be quarantined. Therefore, it means they need to inform the school on time so that proper arrangements are being taken, because what we don't want, the last thing you hate during an examination is the trauma, is the anxiety, which unfortunately our learners have been going through it and the teachers this year. And the second thing you don't want is the stigma around this particular virus, because we need to work in solidarity with each other. So the teachers will not be compelled to invigilate. However, if a teacher volunteers that they are going to invigilate, they have got to sign a consent form that indeed they are volunteering, and therefore they understand what is to be done, and therefore they will then undergo a different training altogether, but also be provided with the necessary equipment. However, it is very clear that they cannot be forced, they cannot be compelled to do that. We need to understand that once you have tested positive, the responsibility is the Department of Health, and therefore they have got to take over in making sure that the right to education is not undermined. However, it's important that we look at how we can improve the protocol now.
Just a very short answer on this one from both of you. Mr. Maluleke, are you aware of any instances where teachers refused to invigilate, where learners could not complete the exam on Thursday?
Yes, the learners did complete the exams, although the teachers could not invigilate, and therefore they needed to bring in private invigilators. Some of the schools and the department had to come in and use the departmental officials to invigilate because the teachers did it. So no learner has been disadvantaged unless that particular learner was not, the principal did not know about the situation, or the information was concealed and the learner wrote with any other learners.
Mr. Manuel, short answer from your side as well to that question, but also with regard to some of the demands that you've made. Now, you indicate that you did meet with the Director General on Friday evening, and with regard to this matter of invigilation that you've requested be done by members of the Department of Health, what has the response been to that as well?
Let me agree with Mugwena. He adequately covered that, and I've got nothing to add there. But insofar as the latter part is concerned, yes, in fact, it was acknowledged that it would be an error to take somebody who does not know how to manage the health side. Remember, it's not about the invigilation only, it's about the health side. And of course, that was accepted, and we are at a place where we agree. However, teachers who do offer must do so knowingly and willingly that they will go in to assist. But Sakina, whilst I'm saying that, let me also make an appeal to parents and children. We in the last lap, please don't do anything that compromises your health and the health and safety of the others. Please stay out of the clubs and don't do these things now, particularly our adult learners as well, that are making up 40% of the total cohort, and the other 60% that are our pupils. Please, parents, ensure that you keeping them safe to keep us all safe.
Mr. Maluleke, and apart from that one demand with regard to the invigilators, are there any other concerns, other demands that you've raised with the department at this stage?
Yeah, we have requested the Department of Education to also address the issues of the transport, that it is critical that the parents take responsibility to make sure that when the learner is going to be commuting between that designated site, they take that particular responsibility. But over and above that, we have also said that the department must make sure that the cost related to the testing by those teachers who were compelled to invigilate is borne by the department and not by the teachers themselves. So including the family who might have been in contact with the teacher who has been compelled to invigilate knowingly or not knowingly, and therefore they need to take that particular responsibility so that we don't have to be in a fighting mood during the time when we're supposed to be giving our children the support and our teachers the support for them to complete this particular very, very difficult situation that they've gone through over this past month.
And Basil Manuel, I'm trying to remember back to Thursday, we had a tweet, I think it was from Paul Bryson Sirache, who says, he asked about the travel of the learners who are actually COVID positive. Do you know how they actually commuted to school and what the broader implications of this might be?
Exactly what Mugwena was alluding to, Sakina, that the vast majority of our learners travel by public transport. And this is what we have to try and avoid. If we have the positive learner traveling in public transport, can you imagine the further impact this will have in the broader community? And of course, the impact on tracing, etc. Of the specific learners, and there were approximately 20 throughout the country, I can't say for sure that they travel by public transport, but certainly it's a given that if 80% of learners travel, that some of them would. And this is why it is so important that we get the protocol out there, that we get people to understand that this is a responsibility shared between parents, teachers, the children themselves, and the Department of Education. No concealment can happen at this time. It would be a disaster.
And the way forward, 10 seconds, Mr. Manuel, and to you, Mr. Maluleke.
The way forward for me is let's work with this. We need to see that it works. However, we also need to see if there are gaps that we need to fill the gaps. And of course, it's our responsibility as a collective.
Your 20 seconds, Mr. Maluleke.
I really agree with this. So it's our collective responsibility that it works, and therefore we are appealing to the parents, we are appealing to the learners, as Basil have said. Let's make sure that nothing compromises our future, and clearly, and the work that the teachers have done needs to be commended, and therefore let's stay out of the clubs. Let's make sure that we concentrate on the writing of our examination, and clearly this does not apply only to grade 12. It also apply internal examination. We still have to address those particular issues. Thank you so much.
And thanks to you, Basil Manuel, Executive Director of NAPTOSA, and Mugwena Maluleke, the General Secretary of SATU, talking to us about not being consulted regarding grade 12 learners who have tested positive for COVID-19 as they sat for that exam last week, Leanne.
We have to go. We'll see you tomorrow morning on SABC 2.